Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have our friend here, Kim Halerwich-Clark. She's the founder of the Solution Wizard from Ontario, Canada. We're excited to have her here. Specifically, it's Corunna, Canada, in Ontario. And we're going to talk today about her company and all that she can do to help you. So let me introduce her. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on, Jill.
Yeah, we're excited. We're joined by an author and, of course, so much more. The owner of the Solution Wizard, again, based out of Corunna, Ontario, Canada. She works with individuals who are suffering from the loss of loved ones by offering online learning material, virtual lessons worldwide, and she uses coaching and also energy healing techniques to help so many people. I know you're a certified NLP, life coach, Reiki master teacher, and, of course, you can be reached at thesolutionwizard.com. Multifaceted woman here. Excited to have her here on the line. So, Kim, would you mind telling us a little bit more maybe about your background to start?
Yeah, for sure. So like you said, my name is Kim Halerwich-Clark, and I reside in Ontario, Canada. So I was working in the real estate industry, and back in 2013, I founded the Solution Wizard company when my first book was published. And I continued writing over the years, and I now have 11 books on Amazon, and most of them deal with self-help topics. And then in 2015, my business took a major turn, and over the last 5 years or so, I have been focused on helping individuals who are suffering from loss.
Well, it's amazing that you're here helping so many people with this topic. I lost my mom 5 years ago to lung cancer. I've lost friends, family members. I know. So I got to ask you about this major turn in your own life and business in 2015. Really changed the direction of your business. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so 2015 started off really good. We were actually planning our dream vacation. We wanted to go to California, and we had a hotel booked, and everything was set up at the beginning of the year. We were going to plan to stay over New Year's Eve and ring in 2016, but life, unfortunately, had a different plan for us that year. In the month of March, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with lung cancer as well, and after a short battle with that, we unfortunately lost her in July, and then our role switched over to being a caregiver for my father-in-law. They had been married for almost 50 years, and he had never lived alone before, so we were caring for him, and then October came, and we had just celebrated my son Logan's 18th birthday at the end of September, and on October 3rd, 2015, I got a phone call at 5:30 a.m. It was a Saturday morning, and I was told by my ex-husband to sit down. And I started to panic a little bit, and I started pleading with him to hurry up and tell me what was going on. Both of our children were staying up in his area, which was about 2 hours away from me. And he tried to be as gentle as possible, but he explained to me that our son Logan had been killed in a truck crash just up the road from his house. And when I heard those words, I involuntarily let out a blood-curdling scream like you would hear in the movies, and my legs literally gave out from underneath me. And I just remember saying over and over again, I don't want to be one of those parents. I don't want to have a child who died.
Oh, my goodness. I am so sorry. I can only imagine the pain of that loss. And to any parent out there who has to lose a child, that's just not the way it's supposed to be, right? It's so heartbreaking. But the fact you're here and doing what you're doing to help other people now, you got to look at the positive, what came from it. So I commend you on that, and I still know it's not an easy thing to do. But do you mind sharing a little bit more and going into further detail of what then happened?
Yeah, I can do that. I think it is helpful for people to see this from another side, just if there's going to be a lesson in my son's death. I come to find out later on that Logan and two of his friends had decided to go on a joyride. They had been drinking, and unfortunately 3 teenagers made a horrible choice that night. And I think one of the hardest things as a parent is knowing that you tried to teach them right. I always taught my son not to drink and drive, but to be honest, I never focused enough about the dangers of being a passenger when someone else was impaired and what the actual consequences could be. He was one of the passengers in the truck, and he was the only one out of 3 boys that died.
Oh.
So he got to be the lesson for everybody else.
Oh.
Yeah, I think sometimes I feel like our family continues to pay the price because Logan's absence is a reminder of one really bad decision by a bunch of teenagers during a night that they were probably having a lot of fun up until that point. And I think that weekend started a journey for myself, trying to get through the biggest challenge that I had ever encountered. And to be honest, I had no idea how I was going to survive this.
Oh, gosh, I can only imagine the loss of a child and how that makes you as a parent feel.
Mm-hmm. I think, I think after, like, when you realize that your child is never coming home again, that's when the pain is almost unbearable. It's very raw and unforgiving, and it literally feels like someone has reached into your chest and is ripping your heart into a million pieces, and all you can do is watch it happening, but you can't do anything about it. So I think the biggest concept that I had to overcome was that my family's tragedy was irreparable. So during my entire life, I was the fixer of everyone's problems. I was the solution wizard before the company even existed. And this time, I felt like I couldn't make it right no matter what I did.
How did you cope with this loss of losing your son, Logan?
Initially, I started reading a multitude of books on the topic of life after death, the meaning of life. I started reading books on psychic mediumship, anything that eased my mind that maybe there was something bigger than our lives here. And so I started searching online for reference materials, videos, or people who believed in the afterlife, as I wanted to hear what they had to say. And I remember following people like Richard Martini. He's well known on the platform Quora, and he talks about spirit world. And I immersed myself in the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. He studied the spiritual realm for over 30 years of his life back in the 1700s. And then I even went to go see a medium for the very first time in my life. And she immediately connected with a young male and described Logan's passing to a T. So after I went, some of my friends and family had readings with this lady, and she did not know that any of us were connected, and my son came through on every single reading. So she was telling us things that she couldn't have gotten correct that many times just by guessing. So I think that helped me realize the possibilities of other realms of existence after this human life is over.
All this really help you in your journey of grief?
I started to become almost fascinated with the idea that perhaps there was something more going on in our existence than what is right in front of us. I guess I always believed in signs and coincidences, but not previously on this kind of a level. Our family conversations started to shift into the topic of life after death, or even though I had never really given much credence to the afterlife before, people I knew had died, but I just didn't ponder their passing in this much detail. So I think by developing an open mindset to the idea that the spiritual realm exists, I think that's when I started to validate some of the experiences I was having personally. So I started to document every episode that seemed coincidental or strange. When it came to the signs I felt were coming from my son. And then I started to share my experiences with family members, and in turn, they started to share their encounters with me. So I did find it very helpful.
Can you tell me about just, some of these experiences? What were you feeling or noticing, or what type of signs were coming through from him?
Yeah, so I actually ended up, after writing for the first year after Logan's passing, I had documented over 300 pages of journal entries, but it took me until 2017 before I was comfortable enough to share my story, and that's when I had Butterfly Kisses from Beyond, Signs from My Son in Heaven. That book went into publication, and I was a little afraid to put it out there as I was sharing a very vulnerable part of myself, because up until that point, my grief and the signs I was receiving was very private to me or my inner circle. So I used to comment, like people used to tell me, "Oh, Kim, you're so strong," and they admired my courage. But in the background, in the beginning, I was not emotionally okay. So I ended up writing this little digital ebook called The Biggest Lie I Ever Told, I'm Fine. Just because when you're dealing with grief, I think there's always a wound inside of you when you lose someone so close to you. And I just wanted people to know that there are other people out there who are struggling with grief. So I did start to document a lot of the signs that I was receiving personally in that book.
And my goodness, this is amazing because I so believe in all of this, and I believe there's so much more to life after here on the earth. So this is beautiful. And just to point out your book or books, say we can find them on the website. Can we find them anywhere else?
Yeah, so you can get them on the solutionwizard.com, but they're also available on Amazon as well. So just searching my name will pull up all the different titles.
Got it. All right. So really what made you decide to start sharing these experiences?
Well, I think deep down I knew that there was other people struggling with loss, and I knew that if I told people that I believed in something more, then perhaps it would give them permission to open up their perspective when it comes to thinking about what happens after this life. So up until my son's passing, I never really pondered what happens to us after we die. I grew up going to church on Sunday mornings, but to be honest, I never seriously contemplated what I actually believed about death. And after I lost Logan, it forced me to look deep inside of myself and explore my belief system a little bit more. So I do remember, I just wanted to mention this, that one of the first books I read after my son passed over was called The Laws of Spirit World. And it was written in the early 1980s by an Indian mother who shared her story when she lost two of her sons in a car accident. But then she connected with them after their passing. And her book helped me so much that I knew that if my book helped just one person in the future, that my purpose for going through this devastation would be worthwhile to someone else's life. I remember stuff like feeling guilty when I didn't think about my son multiple times a day. Sometimes my mind would taunt me that I wasn't showing him love if he wasn't constantly in my mind. And in the beginning, those thoughts were always centered around the loss that I had and him not being here. And then one day I realized I could be productive in the time I spent thinking about him. And rather than wallowing in my sorrow, I would be able to build a stronger connection with him. And I started communicating with him just like he was sitting right in front of me. And I think by doing that, it helped me move through the grief that I was feeling. So I feel there was a bit of a transition from where I was to where I was going through my grief journey. So I basically wrote everything down in my book, and all the signs that I felt that I was getting from him. But then I also documented some of the turmoil that I went through as a bereaved parent.
Well, let me ask you, if you don't mind sharing some of the signs that you started to feel and that you were receiving from your son.
Yeah, so I had a lot of different signs, but some of the ones that I could think of off the top of my head, I think back to the day of Logan's funeral. We were pulling into my parents' driveway. That's where the rest of the family was meeting up. And as we turned into the driveway, there was a loud bang on the back of the window of the truck. And we both swung our heads around because we thought someone was there. And we turned around and looked around, and no one was close enough to hit the truck. So that was just something weird that happened. We also had the fire alarm going off around 4:30 in the morning, which is around the same time that Logan passed. And it would get me out of bed in the morning, and I'd go into the furnace room, and I'd look around, and nothing was going on. We checked the batteries. Everything seemed fine in that department, and that went on for a few weeks, like right after his accident. Then I do remember another time one of Logan's friends was visiting, and after we had visited in Logan's room, he left, and as he was walking out on the front porch, the outside yard light was just going berserk, going on and off and on and off, and I thought the light bulb was going to blow, but it never did. So we both just looked at each other and thought that Logan must have been around making his presence known. And then there was also another time I remember, the first year, and I know a lot of bereaved parents are probably going to agree with this. The first year is one of the most difficult because you have all the special occasions that you have to do for the very first time without them. And I remember my very first Easter, and it was the first time in 18 years that I wasn't shopping for Logan. And I went into the store, and I came across this rack of flower seeds. Now, just to give you some background, when I was in my 20s, I had a morning glory flower tattooed on my back. I just loved blue flowers. And there's a whole story about morning glories, but to make a long story short, I ended up calling my second book Morning Glory. And in Logan's grade 12 English class, he did a book review on my book. And so I hadn't given this flower much thought until I saw this packet of Morning Glory seeds in the store. And I picked it up, and it was called Clark's Heavenly Blue. And my son's last name is Clark. So it struck a chord in me. And then I proceeded to go on to the next store. And when I walked in that store, a song from my son's cemetery ceremony was blasting on the loudspeaker. And I almost thought I was going to break down. But I was pretty sure I was not alone during that shopping trip. So I have had many signs over the years, and I am really glad that I wrote them down. Otherwise, I may have forgotten some. So I do suggest to people to write down the coincidences, because once you start to see that bigger picture of all the different episodes that you just think might be a coincidence or a sign, then that is what convinced me that Logan was still in my life.
And I so believe, like I mentioned, I lost my mother, and I get signs from her all the time. I am a believer, but I'm sure you had some naysayers along the way. Did you have anyone say something that may have been hurtful to you? In regards to the signs themselves, I found I really had to almost weed people, or just find out where their belief system was before I started sharing too much. And then once I could gauge whether or not they were open to the concept, then that's when we could get into a dialogue about it. But I do know that when you're going through a loss, many people are struggling silently. And I think I would have to say that in general, people are not comfortable about talking about loss, or sometimes they might say something that appears inconsiderate to the person who's grieving. But as a society, I feel that we haven't really been taught any life skills when it comes to dealing with loss. And sometimes people might ignore your grief just because they don't know how to help you. And in my case, I was lucky to have a supportive family, and we were very open when discussing our feelings. But I still found there was a lot of isolation and dealing with most of it on my own. So I think that's why I started studying different topics, because as I was learning, it was helping me to heal. And when I say the word heal, I don't mean that I've been cured of grief and now I've overcome it. That's not how grief works. Unfortunately, loss will always remain a part of us, so it's not something that we can get over completely. But just to go back to that question that you said, did someone say something hurtful in regards to the loss? There was an instance that did kind of affect me. And I think it's when people are trying to offer condolences and sympathies, and sometimes the words just don't come out right. I had one person say to me, "At least you had them for 18 years. And I will tell you that it did
sting a little bit. But this person was so nice to me, and I knew her personally, that I knew that her words didn't really intend to hurt me. And when I look back, I do remember being very sensitive to the words that people used, and I would analyze their comments more during my grieving in the beginning than I normally would have. So I think having that awareness has helped me to become more forgiving, because it all comes down to most people have the best of intentions, but they don't always use the right words. And sometimes they're just trying to make themselves feel better because they don't want to have to deal with what you're going through. And many people just don't know what they don't know.
Exactly, unless you've been through it. And unfortunately, we are just about out of time. And I know we have a lot more to talk about, but obviously I'm so glad we got to learn about you, your backstory, and your unfortunate chain of events of loss with Logan, but at the same time how it's inspired you to start coaching, to start helping people, to write books. I mean, so there's a lot to you, which Kim, unfortunately we don't have time to finish. We'll do that in our next episode. But in closing today, then, what would you like to leave for our listeners?
I think just to be gentle on yourself.
Recording in progress.
I've maybe talked to some bereaved parents, and that's probably my biggest suggestion, is just be gentle on yourself. Give yourself room to grieve, because a lot of people get pushed back into work and hectic schedules, and you just need to take that time out for yourself and take care of yourself during this difficult time.
All right. Thank you so much. And if we want to reach out to you, tell us the website again, and of course, where we could find the books.
Yes, it's www.thesolutionwizard.com, and all my books are on Amazon.
All right. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the next time we get to speak. And thank you so much for being so honest and open and sharing your story with us today. Have a great day. And to all of our listeners, we appreciate you as well. Stay tuned. More of the show is on the way.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.